Hello, I'm glad to welcome everyone watching Sotnik-TV this moment. It's Monday, December 9th, 2019. My companion today is Alexander Podrabinek, a popular journalist and human rights activist. Hello, Alexander. Good day. Public Opinion Foundation reported today that around 70% of Russians wish to change the constitution. They didn't want that before, and now they desire that so much. Why would citizens need that? Or is that required by the Kremlin? And if so, why would it require that now? Well, first of all, I wouldn't take reports by Public Opinion Foundation seriously. In response to those sociological surveys, I start suspecting that Soviet sociology description as a public whore of the imperialism has a point, when applicable to modern sociological services. Public Opinion Foundation, as well as TSOM, though, is known by its pro-Kremlin position and dependence on the authorities, so I guess that we shouldn't take the numbers they provide seriously. Yet the fact of such survey conducted and such numbers reported reflects Kremlin possibly checking the public reaction to the constitution changes. We understand that by 2024, when another Putin's term is over, he will prefer to remain at power rather than go into prison. So they will try to change the constitution to legalize his further staying at power. For say, they could turn the country into a parliamentary republic from the presidential one. There's one of their options, but there may be others. Yet those are some funny numbers, as no one believes that constitution, showing little interest, which is understood. That is some frivolous document that has no practical use in that country nowadays. So I'm not surprised that Russians pay little attention to that. I believe that Novaya Gazeta news outlet has published the constitution with the articles betrayed nowadays marked red. So almost the entire document was red. Excuse me for that coloring. So I guess they are checking the reaction and might be preparing the public opinion for the constitution changes. So you think that will be changed specially for Vladimir Putin, making him some irremovable prime minister or some nation leader like Deng Xiaoping? Is that what you're saying? It's hard to say what's on their mind. I don't think they have decided that for themselves. There's no final decision. But the survey by such odious sociological service shows them thinking that way. Regarding Putin's meeting with Lukashenko, please give your comment on the absence of an outcome or even a joint declaration following that event. The strategy of Kremlin is to return under the influence of Moscow as many as possible former Soviet territories, or those previously influenced by the USSR. That strategy is not something new. That has been declared by Mr. Putin back in the days when he said that the collapse of the USSR was the greatest geopolitical disaster. He's trying to oppose that disaster in some ways, to compensate it by taking as much territory as possible under the influence of Moscow. The thing is that Putin is the man of the century before last. He thinks with the categories of those times when a big and a great state was the country with a large territory. He is still convinced that would matter for nation glory. That is some obsolete thinking by the people raised in Soviet spirit. They were raised in the USSR and adopted those ideas. They got those well. And now he is promoting those ideas. So the situation over Ukraine, as well as the situation over Belarus, lay within the frames of a single paradigm. The empire needs to be reborn in one form or another. We are even aware of an idea of some democratic or sovereign empire spoken. Yeah, the entourage doesn't matter. It's important for them to have that country conquer the rest of the territory nearby. Such a maniac idea that won't lead to no result in the 21st century. Yet, that may cause a lot of trouble. The final question I've also asked Boris Stamachin, who has finally departed from the territory of Russia and is now safe. Let me congratulate him on that one more time. So that was the question I asked. How far do you think can the cruel and decisive Czechist go holding the power? Let me tell you right away that Boris Stamachin said they might even start shooting a crowd from helicopters, just like that. It's hard to foresee such situation. Nothing can stop them, basically. They don't value humanity, nor have any red lines within their public relations. They may shoot people from helicopters. Haven't they done that in Chechnya? Haven't they done that in Georgia in 2008? Isn't that a tradition of the regime, of those people whose political inheritors they became? Everything is possible. I think that will depend on the proportion of hard measures and their personal risk. Will they see that the critical measures they take allow them to hold the power? Is there any risk of them suffering the fate of Nicolae Ceausescu or Muammar Gaddafi? They had shown the maximum of cruelty and paid for that. I guess those are the scales they will weigh that on. But the real situation will depend on the real circumstances. Thank you very much. Live from Moscow, that was Alexander Podrabinek, a journalist, an activist, and a public figure. During this session of Human Rights Council, the HRC, that under the current conditions can also be described as Hell Rights Council in Kremlin, Putin gave a paradigmatic report. Let me quote that. When he throws a cup, that's nothing. When he would throw a plastic bottle, but that would be nothing as well. Then he will throw a glass bottle, and then a stone. Then they will start shooting and robbing stores. End of quote by Putin. Who but a historian can give a comment to those words? Many things are taken from history and repeat themselves. Those are taken for a reason too nowadays. Everything is a part of historical connections and patterns. So I asked Igor Chubais, a historian, to give us his comment on that. Those are the great words confirming something I've spoken out already. Total ideology exhaustion. Though I'm quite a young person, my age is quite solid. So I do remember the Soviet times, when we were told something like that. What's gonna happen if everyone starts rioting? That was when a Stalin appeared. We should urgently stop producing and selling drums, as once everyone who bought those drums gather and start playing, we all will get deaf. Yet such absurd logics, saying that a cup today is followed by a bottle tomorrow and so on, shows the failure of the policy by the government. That also demonstrates the legal unlawfulness of those decisions. Throwing a cup means nothing, as no bottle was thrown afterwards, no stone was thrown as well, and those people were judged for putting likes on the internet. So the government is afraid of its own shadow. That means that the government is really weak, that is only holding by means of numerous security forces. Some words about the meeting in Paris. Different sides of that meeting describe that from different perspectives. One of the Telegram channels supporting Putin is not ashamed of posting the following, let me quote, "LDPR is some great long-playing tiebreaker that would weaken the Ukraine, pushing it out the all-European processes. Preserving the conflict within the implementation of Minsk agreement is acceptable for Moscow. During that meeting, the status of Zelensky was accepted. That is supposed to enhance him, allowing to commercialize the process. Greed is an old weakness of Ukrainian crew, as well as the total lack of conflict settlement ability. Yet all involved in Normandy process are satisfied." End of quote. That is the position of the official propaganda from Staraya Ploshchad Square. Once our expert for today is Igor Chubais, and the Normandy format has to do with history as well. The news history, the history of the recent days, that will surely leave its track in history. So I asked Igor Chubais to give his comment on that. Something prior to that meeting is important. The entire Ukraine was raging. Mass civil actions took place there under the slogan of non-betrayal. Cannot allow betrayal. Russia kept totally quiet as local citizens are not subjects to the political life. Those supporting the dignity revolution were simply unable to go on the streets. And those supporting the annexation of Crimea simply didn't receive no order. So everything was safe and sound up here. That illustrates the abnormal state of Russian society and Russian policy. Ukrainians really feared something could go wrong and Zelensky would step away. Crossing some red lines. Those were the expectations. We don't know the reality in details, but many things come clear with time. My personal impression is that meeting was successful for Ukrainian delegation, for Zelensky and his crew. They were convincing. They spoke from their hearts, defending their country's interests. So they were heard. As for the delegation from Russia, they acted sluggishly, repeating some things even they didn't believe. The rest of the participants didn't as well. So that was some kind of an emotional defeat. Besides, there have been some other important details we don't discuss now. Yet I must say a number of paragraphs that shouldn't be listed now have been overtaken by Ukraine. Ukraine appeared stronger. Many thought that Putin would trick and overplay. In fact, Ukraine did. Another detail was that the question of peace was the main for Ukrainian delegation, as well as the question of territory, regaining the sovereignty over the part of Donetsk and Lugansk regions. That question seemed of a little interest for Russian delegation. Their main topic was gas, as Americans are reported to be able to find a way to influence those involved in Nord Stream 2 construction. Russia has already lost much of that gas line, as a decision was made in Europe that only half of the gas can be owned by the one building the line. So that has already been split by two, and now other problems will occur, especially since the huge sanctions of international courts. The court in Sweden has proven Russia acting illegally. All that stroke Russian elite, Russian business, as well as the gas economy. So, trying to make some kind of a deal, they even started retreating. They even started offering some beneficial prices. Yet only a naive man could believe all that, taking that seriously. So Russian delegation's position was weak. As a result of the negotiations, they didn't look winners, while Zelensky did great. He has stood for his country and deserves respect. That was the opinion of Igor Chubais, the historian.